All kinds of things are happening on the political land front and everything along those lines. I've got Rick with me, and we'll talk about a number of these things as well as see who else joins us and all along those lines. But definitely a lot going on, including the fact that it looks like the Pentagon may be pulling back on some of the things historically that have been done and all along those lines. So it looks like they might be pushing back on having Black History Month and a number of other things like that. So definitely that is something that is going on in addition to the whole notion of some of the controversial picks. So Trump's pick for Intel chief, Tulsi Gabbard, is facing her confirmation hearings. And I know RFK was doing his confirmation as well. And it definitely, like I said earlier, Trump's sweeping executive orders are testing local control of schools. So definitely a lot's going on in that space as well. It looks like RFK Jr. stumbled over basics of Medicare as well as Medicaid during his Senate confirmation hearing and all along those lines. So definitely is a lot going on in this space, including some of the sharpest bipartisan grilling to date. And that's what's going on with those particular things and all along those lines. So definitely Trump's tariffs loom, and even his supporters in Texas are nervous about the tariffs as well. And to pay for Trump's tax cut, the House GOP is floating a plan to slash benefits, I should say slash benefits for the poor and working class. So definitely looks like that's something that's going on. And trans service members say they want to fight for their country, not for their jobs. So definitely a lot's going on in that space as well. So a lot's going on. And of course, Trump's got all kinds of things that are taking place as he is just going more and more executive orders and all in that kind of way. So it ought to be interesting to see what folks' reactions to these executive orders are and all in that kind of space. But the FAA is facing a major crisis without a leader because apparently Elon Musk pushed him out. So that's something else that folks are saying, because the leaderless FAA began an investigation of the Washington plane crash. So the NTSB says, give us time in determining the air crash cause. And that was about an hour ago. And apparently there is a feud between Elon Musk and the former FAA boss, Mike Whitaker. So apparently even Elon Musk has gotten involved in this particular case as well. And Tulsi Gabbard refuses to call Edward Snowden a traitor. So that's something else that was going on in her particular hearing as well. So a lot's going on in the world, and a lot of things are taking place, including right here in the United States with all of these hearings and all along those lines. So definitely it'll be interesting to see what goes on in that space. Apparently, Donald Trump has also taken a forceful and unprecedented steps to combat anti-Semitism. So definitely he's asking schools to report activist students for deportation. So that's something else that is out there as Trump orders pushes universities to monitor protesters that are out there on student visas. So definitely a lot's going on in that way as well. So a whole lot's taking place, and employee groups and Democrats and experts are warning feds not to accept deferred resignation offers. So some people are saying it's not a buyout, and attorneys and unions are urging federal workers not to resign. So fear and chaos grip federal workers as Trump rapidly remakes the government. So definitely it looks like a whole lot's going on in the government. So I'll bring in Rick and see what he's got to say about a number of these things and what's going on in his world as well.
All right, so Trump had a press conference and he signed some kind of proclamation. He for about 2 minutes, he read something somebody else must have written for him, where he expressed warmly expressed sympathy for all Americans and for the families of the victims, and it was comforting and a little weird because we don't usually hear that from him. But then he went right back to bragging that his air traffic controllers were better than Obama's, and then Biden made them crappy again. And then later, to sit down with the press, he blamed DEI, and when pressed on it by Caitlin Collins of CNN, he said maybe. So the two pilots of the plane, white guys, the helicopter pilot, a 30-year-old white guy with 1,000 hours of experience flying that copter. I would guess that the air traffic controllers are white, just based on statistics. Reagan National is and along with all, most U.S. airports, is way understaffed.
Right.
Air traffic controllers. Full staff at Reagan would be having 30 of them. They only have 19, so less than 2/3 of how many they should have. One fella or lady was handling both helicopter traffic and airplane traffic that night. There should be two, one for the copters, one for the planes. But no, they're understaffed. Even so, that controller, 12 seconds before, 13 seconds before, called out to the copter twice. Look at the plane in front of you, go behind it. Said, do you see the plane? And I think the copter acknowledged. So the traffic controller, I don't think did anything wrong. Maybe if they had as many people, there would have been a controller to yell at the copter more but it wasn't DEI. It was.
And I guess he was trying to blame it on DEI. It doesn't sound like there was a minority up there in the air traffic control station, but I'm trying to figure out what DEI has to do with a plane crash, unless you signed to say that the pilots of the Black Hawk were minorities or something like that.
They've showed the picture of the Black Hawk, just a regular white guy. I read about why there is an air traffic controller shortage. Mm-hmm. It stems from COVID, because travel shut down and training shut down during the worst days of COVID. Some people quit, took early retirement. There wasn't, there was less work, and also it knocked out a lot of, people couldn't train, and we're still trying to recover from the what COVID did. And in a way, Trump made COVID worse than it had to be. Also, I looked at salaries for air traffic controllers, and for having so many people's lives in their hands and having such a stressful job at Reagan, these guys are working 6 days a week, 60 hours a week. That's bad for a super stressy job like that.
Well, and I understand that that's one of the most stressful jobs of all. I know Sasha's had a number of jobs, including working on a cruise ship and all along those lines. But I remember even back in the 80s and 90s, when looking at different jobs, that they listed air traffic controllers, I think, as one of the most stressful jobs for exactly the reason you said, that because you've got all those lives in your hands and everything.
Right, and then starting salary. Now, this might not be right. I got it from. Might be $64,000, which is not a lot in modern terms. And average salary is like 110, 120, which is barely okay. People should get paid more than that for that job.
I agree, but I've also heard that cruise ships can be a very stressful job. The captain, not necessarily the music director, but I imagine the music director, which is what I think Sasha might have done at one point or another, can be stressful as well. So what are some of the more stressful jobs that you have seen? And did you hear the same thing that I did, that air traffic controllers is one of the most stressful jobs that is out there?
I think my first job in Canada, in Toronto, was probably the most stressful one. My job was how should I say, a music demonstrator. Mm-hmm. What that means, that was a very big music store in Toronto, right in downtown. And they had a grand piano there, and they had a stack of different sheet music. Anywhere, could be Bach, Beethoven, or Tchaikovsky, just almost anything. And when people would show up for sheet music, and they would like to hear how it sounds. So they would provide me with this sheet music, and I had to play right from the side
Yeah, well,
for them. And some music was quite easy, some music I knew anyway, but some music I didn't know. So I had to sight read. And there was no time to practice or to do anything. So I just had to play. So that was quite stressful because I was always afraid that somebody will come out with a very difficult piece of music that I didn't know, and I would have to play it by sight reading, and that's not easy job.
no, not easy at all. Hey, Rick and Sasha, the other thing that came up in the news, and I was hoping that Nick would be here because this is right up his alley and everything. But apparently, the chairman of the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, has waded into the politicized debate over NPR and PBS. So he's ordering up an investigation that he said could be relevant in lawmakers' decisions about whether to continue funding the public news organization. So Brendan Carr, the chairman, said in a letter to NPR and PBS on yesterday that the inquiry would focus on whether the news organization's member stations violated government rules by recognizing financial sponsors on the air. So it looks like they are targeting folks in that space and all along those lines. I wonder if Kim's got some ideas around that as well. I was hoping Nick might join us, but we've got Kim. But it looks like the NPR and PBS are being targeted because they're wanting to know whether they should be if they're violating government rules by recognizing financial sponsors on the air. So the FCC is doing a report, and they said to the extent that the taxpayer dollars are being used to support a for-profit endeavor or an entity that is airing commercial advertisements, then that would further undermine any case for the continuing to fund NPR and PBS with tax dollars and everything like that. So I know that Nick has brought this up before and everything. So what are our thoughts around this? One of the biggest nonprofit organizations in terms of media, which is PBS and NPR, might be having their finances pulled from them in terms of government financing.
So I know a little bit about federal regulations based on owning a telephone company in several states. One of the things that you need to do is always provide a means to provide the public with emergency information, news reports. I don't know why they're going and attacking the only TV network in the country that reaches rural areas that some don't even get fiber and cable. So that's one great thing about the old broadcasting systems is they can broadcast far and wide and to everyone. You can actually still get TV for free. But and actually they've added more channels, but I don't understand how they can justify doing that because how else are you going to get emergency notifications out to people? You can't do that. So
So NPR and PBS, I think they only get what 1 to 3% of their funding from the feds.
Yeah, they've been told a long time ago that they need to, most of it is paid for by the viewers.
Yeah, that's very
I want to
true.
go back to DEI for a second.
Yeah, go back to DEI.
A bunch of times I said it's all white guys, and it's like there's something wrong with me saying that because, like, even if it weren't, Black people, women are just as qualified. It's not like this the standards. No, the standards were relaxed at some point under COVID or widened under COVID, so you didn't need a bachelor's degree, but that was just to make it, that wasn't for DEI, that was just to make, they weren't recruiting enough air traffic controllers. I found out another thing about air traffic controllers. You have to retire at 56 because it's so stressful.
There's some other fields like that. I think
they're understaffed and overworked. They're not supposed to be allowed to work but so many hours a day anyway to prevent accidents. And but they are just like our doctors are right now. Our medical field is way understaffed, and way overworked. And they're starting to fall apart as well. I mean, there's no breathing room for some of these programs, because our insurance has ruined everything in this country. I hope that instead of dismantling a medical system, they dismantle the insurance first. But I agree with you. But I don't think hiring somebody just because of DEI caused the problem. And what a poor leadership we have. That first thing out of his mouth is, "Oh, it's because of DEI." Instead, he should have said, "You know what? I have no idea what caused it. Let me get to the bottom of it, and I'll let you know."
Yeah, I did more reading about it than frickin' Trump does in a week. But any, like I said, they changed standards, so you didn't need a bachelor's degree to go to air traffic controller school, of which, and only 35% of people who start the school make it through because it's really tough. But they got rid of the bachelor's thing to make it so they could bring in more candidates. That's not DEI.
But speaking of DEI, apparently the Pentagon, the Defense Department's intelligence agency has paused observances of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Pride Month, Holocaust Day of Remembrance, and other cultural or historical annual events in response to President Donald Trump's ban on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the federal workplace. So these instructions were published on Tuesday in a memo obtained by the Associated Press and I'm sure other media outlets as well. But it looks like some of the events include Black History Month and also National Hispanic Heritage Month and a number of others, including, like I said, the remembering the Holocaust and all along those lines. But it looks like they are targeting some of these heritage events and everything like that, at least in the Pentagon. So what is our thoughts around this? Should we have these heritage events or we don't need to have them? Because apparently he's directing the Pentagon to not have these celebrations. And we know that it kind of backfired on them with the Trump directive, the Tuskegee directive, and they kind of are backpedaling on that one. But what are our thoughts around this notion that apparently they want to get rid of a number of things that have now been there historically for a while?
Excuse me, just to finish with air traffic controllers.
Yeah, go ahead.
Remember the presidency of Ronald Reagan when there was a strike of air traffic controllers?
There was.
And he fired everybody. And that's what even today, I don't understand how it works, because there is a substantial entry point to become, including training, air traffic controller, so he could fire and replace them. By whom? But he got these people to replace, or they changed their mind and came back to work. I don't remember these details, unfortunately, because I guess I was too young at the time, or maybe I wasn't. but I didn't.
Might not have been paying attention.
Even today, I don't understand how it could have happened.
And apparently they met a goal that the person that Elon Musk doesn't like, Mike Whitaker, said in September that the agency had met its 2024 goal of hiring 1,800 controllers. Airline executives said they expected the problem to still persist, though, because I think they still got a greater shortage and everything like that. But they did manage to have a goal and hire some of these folks. And they'd also called for 10 hours off between shifts and 12 hours off before and after a midnight shift, and a limit on consecutive overtime assignments. Because one of the things that I've always heard is that it's a stressful job, and sometimes they are working more hours than they can actually probably do successfully, and all along those lines.
Do you want your plane to be guided in by somebody who's on his 58th hour of a 60-hour week? On his
no, there's regulations that prevent that. Personally, I'm thinking about doing trains until Trump's out of office, because this is pretty scary because, again, they are way understaffed, have been for very long. It has nothing to do with their education because they get ample training. The trains, do you know it's harder to get your license to become a train conductor? You only get one opportunity to pass the test, just one. If you fail, you're out. So, I think that Trump putting a hiring freeze on air traffic control may have caused some problems. I believe that we need to take a look at what's going on in the realm of that. What was the helicopter doing in that airspace to begin with? I'm not talking about over where he was at. They were allowed to be there, but they're only allowed to be at 200 feet. And they were at 350 feet where the airplane was. Why were they higher than what they were supposed to be?
If we have a competent Secretary of Defense, he will shut down. I'm copying somebody I read on Twitter. He'll shut down these training flights around busy airports until they figure it out.
Well, that should have been done a long time ago. There's plenty of
I read one more thing about air traffic controllers. We don't have enough, but what if we just shuffled them around from other airports, to address some of it? You can't. It turns out these people are trained and have experience in their specific airspaces. You can't just move them around like frickin' checkers to cover,
True. I mean, I want to know, what was that Black Hawk doing up there anyway?
It was on an annual training certification run with an at least one experienced pilot. And who knows why he didn't see the plane in front of him, except, the plane is moving at what, 150, 160 miles an hour?
Yeah, I mean, but they were directly in line with each other. So who knows what the line of sight is?
Not directly, but I don't.
Yeah, they said though that he had. All I did was I saw right when it happened, they had a video up, and I saw the impact. That's all I saw.
The plane was descending, so it wasn't flying just straight.
Right, but it was still.
It was actually descending.
Right, but it was still at 350 feet airspace, not. Not 200. And what is, even if it was descending, what is the Black Hawk doing higher than its airspace? That
they told the Black Hawk to get behind the plane.
Yeah, they did tell him to get behind the plane, and he didn't. So something tells me one of two things: there was a terrorist in our tower and manipulated something. We had a hacker.
No,
a terrorist.
You can hear that you saw. They have the tape. You can listen to it of the controller. I'm sure he or she, probably he, demographically, is traumatized. He was a participant in this horrible, the worst accident in U.S. aviation in something like 20 years, but he didn't do anything wrong. He's like, "Hey, helicopter, do you see the plane in front of you?"
Right.
And then he says, "Get behind the plane."
But the helicopter, they could have had their controls hacked. The plane could have had their controls hacked, and it could have misaligned. There's so much that can happen with AI being incorporated into all of these machines. Hackers can hack into any AI system. Mm-hmm. And you've got...
If anybody could do anything, it was helicopters. The plane could not do anything because it was going.
Yeah, it was coming down, and air control knew it.
Only helicopter could do anything.
Right. So, okay. So explain to me, it was 67, I want to say about 67 people on the plane. Where were they from? I thought that they were from.
They were from all over, but there were some Russian and some American figure skaters.
They were a bunch of teenage
almost all of them were figure skaters. There were a big.
It was a big group of figure skaters, is what I heard.
Their coaches, and very young people, as young as some of them looked like they weren't even teenagers.
Were they all from Russia, or were they all?
No, they're.
Okay. So, because that was the other thing I was going to say is, could it have been an attack based on where they were from or something? So I mean, there's. All I can say is hackers.
Every time something like this happens, they develop new safeguards and redundancies. And generally, in the case of an air catastrophe, it's 2 or 3 errors that compound each other, including most of the time there's human error. So I'm guessing that it will be, and I don't know any more than frickin'.
I would like to ask a question. Hold on. There is a command going to the helicopter's pilot, get behind the plane. What does it mean? How he could get behind the plane? He saw the plane, but I guess it was too late to maneuver.
Well, no. It means change your trajectory and your speed, so your path, you don't cross the plane's path until the plane has crossed in front of you.
You know,
Oh, but that's what not command. Command was get behind the
behind the
plane.
plane.
I don't even understand what that command means.
That
How
means-
we got Shaquille from down under. Maybe they got better air traffic controllers in
but
Australia.
you know what
and
they
it was-
did comment on this morning, or this afternoon actually? They did say that wind may have played a factor in it. That might have been one of the reasons why the helicopter was flying in a higher airspace than what they're allowed to be flying in. But it still doesn't change the fact. Yes, Sasha, they said get behind the plane.
that doesn't mean anything. I don't understand it. Let's see if
To
I'm.
you, it probably doesn't, but they probably assumed that the helicopter knew the plane was there. We haven't heard all of the recordings from the helicopter, have we?
No.
No.
But how will you understand get behind the plane? Let's say you're a pilot and you're getting the message, get behind the plane. What does it
I assume that's standard terminology for people who are trained so that your path doesn't cross the other aircraft's path until the aircraft is beyond you.
I would
Yeah,
think
but
so
you
too.
have to get behind the plane. If you're ahead of a plane, how
Right.
you get behind the plane? It should have been different command. It should have been get out, danger, do something, not be
No,
get
or
out.
drop your airspace. What are you doing at 350 feet when you're supposed to be at drop?
Could have been
and-
dropped underneath
And
it.
the helicopter should have dropped. That's what should have happened. He should have dropped his airspace and allowed the plane, but he wasn't.
Yeah, just really quickly. Hold on a second. We got
What do you
Shaquille here as well. I was just wondering because I had a couple of questions, and one of them Shaquille may have some thoughts around as well. But how good is the air traffic system in Australia and in the places that you've traveled? Because that's part of what this whole conversation has been about, the crash that happened between the Black Hawk and the passenger plane that was carrying some folks that were figure skaters and all along those lines. But I don't know how it is in Australia, whether y'all have a better or a comparable system to what we have here in the U.S. when it comes to air traffic controls and plane crashes.
Yeah, so I'm actually in an airport at the moment. I'm about to take a flight. So obviously waking up to the news that there was a plane crash in America is a little bit disconcerting for everybody. Look, I think the challenge the United States has is that it's a big country with a lot of different airports, a lot of aircraft in the sky at any given time. So there's a lot to monitor. And I think it's fantastic that America rarely has anything catastrophic happen. It's very, very sad to see that, 65 people, 70 people, something have lost their lives in this crash. I think air traffic control has a lot of challenges. Predominantly, I travel, obviously, if I'm not in Australia or New Zealand, then I travel through Europe or the US. What I understand of Europe is that they actually have a very fragmented system because of the different countries, but they seem to manage it pretty well. I'm a little bit disappointed that Donald Trump has immediately blamed DEI. I suspected he was going to do that because it was something that they warned about, complained about in the last couple of years. But you don't know exactly what happened yet. We don't know that it's human error, probably is. But there's also computer systems that monitor these things. So there should have been alerts being given to flight controllers. So, I would just say we should hold off. Let's not rush to judgment yet and find out what happened. And we also have to accept that sometimes human beings just make mistakes. And we have to try to make sure that those mistakes can't be repeated. But I don't like the blame game being issued out quite as quickly as what Donald Trump has.
Yeah. Speaking of the blame game,
there is a worldwide traffic controller shortage. It's not just the U.S.
Yeah,
They've been going on strike in other countries for a very long time too. I don't like flying through France at all because you never know when they're going to go on strike. So you're absolutely right.
There's also a worldwide pilot shortage. And, in my opinion, part of the reason for that is because it's prohibitively expensive. And in the countries, in places like the United States, the pay actually isn't that good compared to what you would earn if you spent that much time studying something else. And then they say, well, you should do it for the love of it. well, I don't know how many people here have sat in a cockpit, but it's not, flying is fun, but, sitting in a cockpit and being a bit cramped in there, it's not actually as glamorous as what perhaps it was 30 years ago.
Shakil, but have you ever heard about crashes of Singapore Airlines? Do they ever have shortage of pilots? I never heard about that. And I flew by Singapore Airlines. It's one of the best. And they always have pilots and they're coming on time. It's not like sometimes in the United States, the plane is delayed because the crew was late. They arrived too late. So
but I think that's Sasha. I think I experienced more flight delays in the United States than anywhere else. I think that's a number of factors, as I said before, with a lot of flights being in the air, and it's a lot to manage. But you're right. The issue for the United States, which has been complained about really by the centre left for a very long time, is that pay and conditions aren't as high and aren't as good as what they are elsewhere. So that's why you'll see American pilots that will go and work for Singapore Airways or Qatar or Emirates or whoever, leaving a shortage in the United States. The bottom line is that you need to pay people better and provide with better working conditions, or you're not going to have a workforce.
So I looked it up. It costs between $90,000 and $150,000 to pay for hours to become a pilot.
Mhm.
So
but that's just to get your initial license, right? Then you've got to. But you're going to specialize in either Boeing or Airbus, right? Very few pilots will have both. You're normally going to start with a smaller flight. And if you want to do long haul stuff, you're probably going to be flying for 20 or 30 years. It's a lot of time away from your family, etc. And as I said, I know a lot of pilots because I fly a lot and very interested in the industry. I just personally feel like if we want to have a robust airline aviation industry that's available for people so we can data around the world, we have to pay people properly, and it's difficult. American Airlines had a really tough year last year. I remember telling you, Sasha, that it looked like a good buy, and they doubled price since I said that to you. But they had tough financials. They had a lot of issues, plus they had the issues with Boeing. And a lot of this comes down to corporate greed, where they're cutting staff, cutting safety rules, and just trying to rip money out of the company. Now, that might sound like I've turned to the left. I haven't. I've always said that we need to have a balance for these things.
Shakil, I also, on CNBC in the morning, I heard the interview with the chairman of Southwest Airlines, which is one of the best in the United States. And his opinion was that the air traffic controllers are using equipment from the 60s. There's have to be update in the equipment because the newest equipment is much more up to date and more powerful. And he didn't blame exactly the equipment on that crash, but that was his opinion, that all equipment is used is from the 60s, 50s.
And by the way, Sasha, just really quickly to let you know, hold on a second, you are right about Singapore, because apparently their airline earlier today clinched the top spot as an airline and was ranked 28th overall in Fortune magazine's list of the most admired companies globally. So in terms of the airline, Singapore Airlines is considered the top airline and everything like that. And they apparently surveyed 3,380 executive directors and security analysts from around the world, and were asked about everything from quality of management to innovation to global competitiveness. And
Mark, one small detail. I flew first time the Singapore Airlines probably 30 some years ago. And I was impressed that we were flying in economy class. And when we just entered the plane, we were approached by a stewardess, and she addressed us by first and last name.
Well,
I couldn't believe that.
well, they said it's the second highest ranked Asian company behind Toyota, which came in 25th place. So the highest ranking Asian company is Toyota, which of course we know is a car company. And
the service on Singapore, Thai, Etihad, Emirates has always been wonderful. I'm a little bit unimpressed with British Airways, to be honest with you. I'm not. Air Canada is a bit like Qantas, you've sort of got a monopoly, so you get what you get. But really impressed with some of those international airlines. I just want to come back to what you said about the infrastructure. This is where I think Biden and the Democrats, when they were talking about the infrastructure bill, this is the sort of stuff where the money should have gone. because it is true. Now, the Republicans are in control now. Hopefully, the reports Doge is claiming that they're saving the US government or the US taxpayer $1 billion a day. But I think it's important that there's an audit of some description so you can find out where the money's going. There was a report that came out last year about the age of the naval fleet that the US has. Well, here's a country that's spending between $800 billion and $1 trillion a year. Where's the money going that they've got equipment from the 70s? Where's the money going that they've got equipment in their air traffic control from the 60s? It doesn't make sense. And I think that it puts the United States in a somewhat perilous position if they're not funding vital infrastructure.
Hey, I'm probably going to get you in trouble with this one on You Should Kill, but as I mentioned before, the cultural center I work at is an African-American cultural center, and there was a gentleman, I think he's now doing it from his home, but one of the things that he was noticing was that there was a shortage of pallets, as you mentioned, but there was also a shortage of minority pallets. So he was actually trying to encourage kids that were from the minority community, and ironically, he had students of all communities in his course and everything. So yes, he did have some white students as well, but he was trying to encourage pallets for people to look into that as a field, even in the minority community. And as far as I know, he's still running that program, even though he's not running it from the center the way he used to. So I don't know how you feel about those kind of programs that try to balance try to do some affirmative action in fields that are lesser, that don't have as much representation.
Look, I don't care. Is the issue at hand, right? I think that you want to get more pilots. Now, if people from within certain minority communities are saying, "Hey, look, we should have a go at this. We should start, being more involved in this industry." I think that's wonderful. What I don't think is wonderful, and what I think there's been quite a strong reaction to in the United States, and you're beginning to see that reaction permeate into the United Kingdom and Australia and elsewhere, is the idea that some people will not be able to get the job even if they're more qualified because there's a preference for somebody who is in a minority community. Now, again, I think there has to be a balance. Women have been excluded from many jobs for a very, very long time. They were excluded from being able to vote for a long time. And there is still some overhang from that. There's still some overhang for the racism, for example, that occurred in the United States and civil rights, etc., with blacks and with other people. Yes, you do need to sometimes do something, but I think it perhaps feels to the majority of people as though it's gone too far. So yeah, sure, encourage minorities, encourage everybody to be involved, but just keep it balanced. Don't punish another.
Let me go back to pilot salaries for a second.
But let me just say this, don't punish another kid because they've got the wrong skin color. So that's what
that's what I said. Mr. Wheeler, who was actually
hold on. I got to think.
Hold on a second.
Hold on. So the previous air disaster with a plane of this type was in 2009 over Buffalo, New York, where a plane iced up and it was due to and it crashed into Buffalo, killing 49 people. And the NTSB comes in and said, your co-pilot was getting paid $16,000 a year. The pilot was getting paid $55,000 a year. The company said, no, we were paying her $23,900. But either way, it's freaking ridiculous. You can't. And
just on that, because I'm going to sound like I'm contradicting what I said before. Yes, I think pilots do need to be paid properly, but just on that, I don't know all the information here, so I'm going to speculate a little bit. But this was an ACJ, right? So it's a small plane, and that's what I was referring to before. Very often, when pilots first get a gig with an airline, especially a legacy airline like AA, they're going to start on the smaller planes first before they get in charge of those bigger planes with 300 people and 400 people on board, that sort of stuff. So that could be a reason why the pay was a little bit lower, is that this might be a relatively inexperienced pilot.
Yeah, but 16 grand, that's like half of poverty rate. So imagine how that pilot has to pay for hotel rooms when they're overnighting someplace.
No. The airline is responsible for those costs.
Right, okay.
You also don't know whether that's a $16,000 base plus ship loading for all the flights they take. You don't know exactly what the package is, but it does sound low. I'll totally agree with you on that.
It does sound low and everything, by the way, and I think Kim was aware of this as well. I do know, and that's what I was going to say even about Mr. Wheeler. He did have pilots of all backgrounds that would come into that program, and I assume that he's still doing it. But there is I want to say it's near High Point, but there is a major flight school that you can actually get your hours here in North Carolina and everything. So that's actually where he was taking his students to and everything along those lines. Because the thing that shocked me, and maybe you can confirm this or not, because you've been on many more planes than I have, Shaquille, but it's my understanding that you don't have to have the same kind of license that you have to have for a car that you have to have for a plane. And that's why there have been some cases of people that are younger than the age of their car license that are actually flying planes and everything. But at least that's what I heard.
For some of the smaller planes and gliders and things like that. All I ever wanted to be was a pilot growing up. That was my first love. I wanted to do that. And then when I was about 14, 15, I met a couple of pilots. This is back in the days when you could actually walk into the cockpit and have a conversation with the pilots, and some flights had flight engineers on board. But they sort of said to me, it's not as glamorous as what you think, and it's kind of boring and this and that. They ended up going into finance, and I think I go to some of the air shows, so I see the beds that the pilots have and stuff like that, and I think flying first class internationally probably a nicer experience than what the pilots get, to be honest. But
I can agree with that, and Shaquille, I can also agree. I don't know what everybody else's first love was. Everybody knows that I've been in journalism for a number of years. Nick teases me about my many decades of experience, but my first love and the first job that I thought that I wanted to do, ironically, was a weatherman, because I used to think that they were really cool jobs and everything, but they don't get paid a lot either unless you are a certain area, like I'm sure the LA.
You could fall in love with like Groundhog Day. You get many chances to get with the girl at the end of it, right? God, I'm going to have to love you and leave you, I'm afraid, because I do have a flight to catch. So God bless you all, and I will hopefully be on tomorrow, but I'm not sure. I will certainly be on next week from another weird and wonderful location. Rick, Kimberly, and actually all of you. Sasha, I'll be flying across to Canada. I'm going across to Vietnam shortly, and then I'll be coming to Europe, over to Canada, and then I'll come down to the States to visit you all. So I'll let you know.
Travel safe. You are aware that there were like a few other airplanes that had to come back down recently, so be very careful. So
perhaps I'll fly to Canada for the moment, and then we'll just drive across the border. Then we'll
I
stop.
think Canada is safer than the United States. Right?
Just wait a little bit with landing in Canada, because it's still very cold.
It's very cold.
Yeah,
Cold is good. You
want
want to fly when it's cold. Cold makes the air denser and heavier, and your plane stays up better.
Smooth.
Well, this is the story of my life.
60
Every time I come
today.
to North America, it's winter. I still haven't seen your summer yet. And I will just say very quickly, the scariest flight I ever took was actually either from Washington to San Francisco or San Francisco to LA. I think it was going into San Francisco, and they couldn't land the plane, so then they had to go back up around, and there was just fog and cloud. And I'm just not used to that, so I can't see anything. You don't know what's happening, and you can just hear the engines roaring. And I was just like, what the hell's going on? But yeah, that was the scariest flight I ever took.
I can imagine.
That sounds really scary and everything. One of the things that Pete Hedges is talking about doing, and I'd love to hear what Rick, anybody else wants to jump in, his thoughts is putting back some of the names back to their original names. So apparently in his latest directive, he started calling Fort Liberty Fort Bragg, and I think he wanted to call Fort Benning back to its original name as well. So what are our thoughts around this? And is this going to be something that we're going to see more of? Because apparently they're also doing an investigation of the GOA and everything like that, because they are feeling that some of those buildings, and you'll love this, Kim, are empty and are sitting empty and just need to be disbanded or used for something else altogether. So that's something that I think they're trying to investigate, is whether the buildings in DC are actually being effectively used. But I did hear that he is looking at changing or wants to change back Benning and Bragg.
He should be worried. He's got other stuff to worry about. If he's still talking about that today, then he's an idiot.
Yeah, what he needs to be doing is focusing on, how they, pay millions of dead people Social Security checks, and they're being cashed.
Well, not
That
Hedges.
system should be taken care of.
Hedges is SEC defense. So he's the one who's got to look at what happened with the Black Hawk helicopter.
Yes, he does need to look at that and everything. Sasha, and I know you'll be talking about it tomorrow, but how is Ukraine going to deal with this loss of some of the money, because that is one of the other things that they're talking about, is cutting some of this money that had been coming from the past administration. And now I think you even mentioned yesterday that there will not be as much money coming to places like Ukraine, Israel, and a number of other places under this Trump administration. So what is your thoughts around this? And is this just a temporary freeze, or are we going to actually see the flow of money coming back to Ukraine? Or are you thinking that that money is done in terms of the flow?
I think that there were exceptions. It was Israel and it was Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Ukraine is the first candidate to join these exceptions. So I wouldn't worry about that at this point at all. And Ukraine now is producing a lot of weapons itself. They have a huge production capacity, especially for drones. And it appears more and more that it's this type of war is a war of drones more than anything else, because all the other traditional weapons, like tanks, for example, they're becoming very vulnerable to artillery, to air attacks, and to drones, by the way, too. And the drones are not vulnerable, even they are. So you produce, for one lost drone, you produce 10 more. And for 10 lost drones, you produce 100 more and thousands. There is no actually any limit how many drones you can produce. So this is really, this is a real war of 21st century. And now, about a lot of people are asking, what's your view on ending the war? I said it's not going to end this year, because neither side is willing to end the war. Ukrainians believe that by pumping up production of drones and other weapons too, they have now their own missiles, and they're creating a chaos in Russian defense lines, and they believe that they can outlast Russians. Now, the Russia believes that because of their superiority in manpower and the weaponry and so on, they will outlast Ukrainians. So neither side really wants a peace. So we'll see where Trump fits in.
You see where Trump fits into that. Speaking of Trump, one of the other things he did, and I'd love to hear Rick's thoughts about this, and even Kimberly's as well, but apparently he's got this idea, because, next year, 2026, is going to be a celebration year for America and everything along those lines, the 250th anniversary and everything along those lines. So he's talking about this wall of heroes, and he has talked about wanting a diverse amount of heroes. I did think Davy Crockett was on the list, as well as Harriet Tubman and a number of other folks. But apparently it's supposed to be like a garden and a big monument that will have a whole bunch of heroes of America and everything like that. So I don't know the full list. Those are two names that came to my mind that I do remember hearing, along with Amelia Earhart. But who would you have on this wall or among these people and everything like that? Because apparently it's 250, and it's supposed to be everybody from pop heroes to government figures to a number of other people in different realms. So we'll have a little bit of fun right now. Who would you have on this list if you were to get your list together? So like I said, I know I would have Martin Luther King, probably Frederick Douglass, Susan Anthony, definitely Amelia Earhart would be on there as well. If I can get a pop star, I'd probably put Prince in there. So who would your 5 or 6 be, and everything along those lines?
There's a guy named Claude Shannon, who was a mathematician and a scientist at Bell Labs. And he came up with information theory in 1948. And we're all living with we live in an information world now, and what's increasingly an information economy.
Yeah. Who would you have on there, Kim? Yeah, you can have more than one. And like I said, I know he just went with one, but who would you have? You were able to give Trump some advice on who he should have in this garden of heroes.
It's such a big question, because there's so many people who do so many things. And I don't know, how big is this list going to be? I mean,
I heard it was like, like 250.
Right. But so many people that people talk about have already been honored in so many different ways. I would like to see someone's name up there that hasn't been recognized or honored at all anywhere. I mean, I think, we need to take a look at some of those people. And there's so many of them, like Mark Kelly. I mean, come on, he's, does so much for our country. And nobody recognizes what he does in fact, he's, trying to fight some of the wrongful doings that are going on. So, did anyone hear that the knee-jerking deportation deported a mother, 2 brand new born twins that were premature, that needed medical attention, premature, and their siblings. Their father is a U.S. citizen in Texas. He had gotten married in 2019 and brought her over and filed the paperwork properly. And her hearing happened to be on the same day that she, delivered the babies premature. And so they filed to the hearing and said, hey, emergency situation, please reschedule us. And they said they would. The ICE team totally ignored it and threw her and her premature babies on a plane and shipped them back to Mexico.
Oh, I ain't heard about that.
I think Trump needs to get sued on that one.
I have
common sense. Go ahead.
All right. So I have one more person for the wall. Henrietta Leavitt. So everybody knows about the expansion, that we live in a Big Bang universe that's expanding.
Yeah.
And you might know that the guy who gets credit for it, guy named Edwin Hubble.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
But
Hubble telescope.
but the woman who actually did the math and found a way to measure distant galaxies, they used to hire women to do kind of shit work in math, just like before we had pocket calculators, they hired women to calculate 100 years ago. And this woman was hired to be a calculator, and she's actually the one who figured out how to measure the universe. Hubble gets all the credit. She did all the work, or a lot of the work. Henrietta Leavitt.
Think about Shannon, whom you mentioned before, is that he was intrigued, and we are talking about late 40s, something like this. He was intrigued by idea to teach computer to play chess, and he believed that the computer truly will exceed human brains and will defeat even the chess world champion, which happened, but about 40 years later. But at that time, the computer wars, they were very weak, very primitive. But what he said at the time, he was insisting, there were 2 schools. One school was that they have to learn how human beings are thinking and try to emulate it. And another school was Shannon's, that by sheer acceleration of computer power, so he believed that the power will multiply, and very quickly, every 2 years, every 3 years, even more often than that. So eventually, and late 40s, I don't know how at that time he could figure out all that, but he figured out that essentially the computer power will become so awesome that it will defeat man by brute force, simply by taking all the moves, whatever they exist, go through them and variation, and it will defeat. And nobody believed at that time that it would be possible. But then in the late 70s, they became quite strong, and by 87, Deep Blue, the IBM chess computer playing machine, defeated Garry Kasparov.
So I have a story about Shannon where there's an AT&T building in Manhattan, and you used to be able to walk through the lobby and see video clips of some of the heroes of the history of AT&T, of which, Bell Labs, I guess, used to be part of AT&T. And they had a history. Shannon was interviewed in his, early 80s. And it was super sad because at the time, he obviously had Alzheimer's. So the guy who came up with information theory, eventually his brain lost the ability to process information, which is.
Yeah, it is sad and everything.
Yeah,
I know
I
that
do
one of
have an interesting one and a story, and I know it's not going to make much sense to you guys when I first say her name, but Lucille Ball.
Mm-hmm.
Lucille Ball was just a class act all around. Super businesswoman, super woman in the media industry. But do any of y'all know the story of when she was driving home from MGM one night and she picked up radio signals in her feelings?
But I know that can happen.
Yeah, it was during the World War II, and she did. And she picked up on spies that were in our country, and she thought there wasn't something right here, and so she reported it, and they were able to capture the spies because
Well,
of her.
that
You don't
brings up
ever hear about it, but yeah.
That brings up another hero to go on the wall, a Hungarian or something, Hedy Lamarr, immigrant, a movie star, maybe the most beautiful woman to ever be in the movies, was also kind of a math genius. And she worked with a guy and developed a way to stop torpedoes. When you're guiding a torpedo to the target, you use radio signals, but the target ship can jam the signals and avoid the torpedo. She had a deal called spectrum jumping. She figured out a way to have the signal jump from spectrum to frequency as the torpedo was going. And she showed it to the Army, and the Army's like, now we don't care about your invention. Can you just go out and sell war bonds for us? And she's like, fine. But her invention is now used in cell towers and every frickin' cell phone.
Yep, and I could add somebody else. Josephine Baker was known for her adoption of many folks when she moved to France, but she was also one that was involved in different efforts as well, even parts of resistance and all along those lines. So I would add her to it. But even to your point, Kimberly, of Lucille Ball, I've actually stumbled across some old clips, and you'll enjoy this, Rick, and everything. But Carol Burnett was truly hilarious because I was watching some of her earlier clips, and I was watching some of the clips, and she was truly hilarious. And she was even like had some things that were both things about relationships, but also about politics as well. But she was much more humorous than I had. Well, I remember laughing at her even as a kid and everything. But I've been watching a few of those clips more recently, and yeah, they've had me just cracking.
Well, or what about when Carol Burnett started?
Before I go, let me two more things before I gotta go. Give my wife a ride, but Lucille Ball, we get one of the greatest. I Love Lucy, one of the greatest sitcoms. She started it because Ricky, Desi Arnaz, would like to go. He liked to bang other women, and so she created a project for them both to keep him close by to limit the banging. Also, Lucy green-lit Star Trek. Star Trek was a Desilu production back in 1964, 65. So
yeah, thank you for the endorsement of Lucille Ball. I've always loved her. She inspired so many other women to get into entertainment. She supported them. There's a story about her and Carol Burnett.
There are movies about this. Behind this, you can look up. There are some decent movies, I think, and one of them, Nicole Kidman plays her. And it's all about behind the scenes, and there's more stories about her standing up to the Red Scare and all that. Anyway, got to go. See you tomorrow.
Bye. Take care. Be careful.
And on that note, go ahead.
I think we're at the top of the hour. And thank you, everyone. Don't forget to watch the updates on the war tomorrow with Sasha at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And make sure, investing properly right now is a good thing. Not having fear to invest is a good thing. And please make sure to watch Sasha's Modern Investing on Wednesdays. I think it's at 1. And because now's not the time to be afraid to invest. And I think Sasha would agree with me. Now's the time to learn and get out there and do it.
Yeah, it's very challenging time for investing. I would, for now, I would avoid NVIDIA simply because of this new Chinese company, DeepSeek. See, the problem is that it's not really a threat to NVIDIA's business, not at all. But a lot of companies may postpone their orders just to make sure what it's all about, this Chinese way. If they indeed do something what NVIDIA does at much cheaper way, so let's at least stop for now, investigate it, and then place their orders. So that can affect their quarterly earnings. I think this quarter will be okay because the quarter basically ended before this Chinese company story. But the following quarter could be affected. So,
Definitely.
yeah,
I think it's going to be like David Walker told me, put your seatbelt on. We're in for a wild ride.
Yep, definitely in for a while, right?
You
And
can
we'll be
always
following
protect your own investments and assets. Watch
Yep.
Sasha's show. I do. Thank you.
Definitely
Thank
do
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
that.